So we're close to the end of this piece. Let's talk about developing your skills, summarizing a little bit of what we've heard, anticipating a little bit of what you might hear in courses that you will take as you develop. According to a number of successful tax partners, the most important attributes, the top 10, if you will, of a good tax professional are not technical competence. It's important and it's necessary and it's in the top 10, but people skills are above it. They're the most important. Start with be a good listener and a good communicator. You have to be a good listener to find out what the client wants and needs. You have to be a good communicator to explain how the ideas that you have and the work that you have done contribute to what the client wants and needs. Stay calm under pressure, whatever kinds of pressure you deal with. We all have pressures. We have pressure from those who are in the management chain above us. We get pressure from work not going the way we wanted it to go. We get pressure from our own mistakes. If you make a mistake, own up to it. I think you'll find that suggested in this program elsewhere. If you make a mistake, own it and clean it up, move on. You'll find very often the severity and the amount of what's involved in cleanup is nothing like what you thought it was going to be, and cleaning up your mistake turns out to be a whole lot easier than you expected. Be reliable and be presentable. Those two things have to do with your personal habits. Be reliable. If the work day in the office that you have decided to go to work for starts at 8 o'clock, be on the job at 8 o'clock or 5 minutes before 8. Not 10 minutes after 8, not 15 minutes after 8, not even 5 minutes after 8. On a regular basis, be on time. Now, that's not very popular in the age of feeling good before you know anything, but I think it's really important to show those who have advanced ahead of you that you care enough about the job and about your professional career, that you care enough about being a functioning professional that you're going to be on time. Now, it doesn't do any good to show up on time if you're still in your pajamas. So be presentable. And in today's work world, that involves, at the very least, slacks, khaki trousers, ideally with a cuff, and it will accommodate a belt, and then a long-sleeved shirt. What do you mean a long-sleeved shirt? Okay, you wear a shirt with a collar, right? Well, yeah, that's okay, but that's not the best. The best is to wear a long-sleeved shirt, which adds an air of, not formality, but an air of respect for the client's work that I just don't think you get with a short sleeve shirt. Now, wait a second. I understand. That's personal preference. I heard you mumbling about that. It is personal preference, but it's personal preference of somebody that's been around a long time and just might think the same way that the person or persons who you're going to be responsible to think. So give that some thought. Then I would like, and others would like, for you to get involved in the community. Not everyone can belong to the Rotary Club or the Lions Club or the Kiwanis Club. Not everyone wants to be a deacon in their church. But all of these things are community involvements which will add to your professional stature. It doesn't do any good in the long run to go to the CPA chapter meetings and count that as community involvement. It counts as involvement, but it counts as professional involvement, not community involvement. Community involvement is going to get you out where you can make speeches to the Rotary Club, you can make a speech to the Bankers Association, you can make a speech to this or that. Every civic club, every organization that has meetings is forever looking for good speakers. And you can be a good speaker. What I talk about? Well, why don't you talk about something everyone cares about and talk about income tax? Talk about the income tax burden on individuals or the income tax reasons why one politician might want to shut down fracking or an income tax reason why another politician wants to keep it alive. What, where do economics enter into our consideration of our involvement in the community? And should it always be just about business? Or should our involvement in the community be to help other people understand the tax rules, the things that might be seen as most restrictive on our behavior and our environment? And then on the list right there, I just looked, there's technical competence, about the middle of the list. Now, technical competence means that you're going to know your way around the code and the regulations, and you're also going to understand some of what David has been explaining in the first and second level authority. That's really important. According to one of these partners, one of these senior partners, as a tax professional, you're expected to organize your work and the work of those for whom you are responsible. As you progress up to tax senior, you're going to have responsibilities not just for your work, but also the work of others, and you're expected to organize it and keep it moving along. You can't shrug your shoulders when you're asked the status of a project. You can't shrug your shoulders and say, I don't know, that's Charlie's project, because Charlie's a junior accountant. You're a senior accountant, right? You got to know what Charlie's doing. That's how the world works. Develop a comfort level with technical issues. Increase your knowledge of the Internal Revenue Code and the regulations. I can't emphasize that enough. It must be done. It's vital. You're going to be a functioning tax professional. Now, with regard to what we just talked about and the interest in not just being a tax professional, but in organizing the work and doling out the work and being comfortable with technical issues, we've got to put the whole package together. So you organize the technical issues, you increase your knowledge of the revenue code, but that doesn't become an overbearing state when you're trying to get along with other people. Trust me, the auditors in your firm will not appreciate you being overbearing about your knowledge of the Internal Revenue Code. Present yourself as a servant. That works pretty well, where the tax specialist presents herself or himself as someone who's willing to help out in any capacity you can. Specifically, you want to answer any questions that might have a tax impact. If you have a good relationship with other professionals, they'll feel free and comfortable to come to you. If you don't have a good relationship, they're going to avoid you like the plague. Don't call Charlie, that overbearing son of a gun. I never want to work with him again. You don't want that reputation. And you're doing all this stuff, you're going to have to be attentive to the progress of the work for which you are responsible. That's not just your work, that's also the work of others. So you need to be prepared to offer assistance, and other people need to know that you are capable of offering assistance so that they will feel comfortable sharing the work with you, and then you capture the time and the circumstances for everything. Time for your work on your project, time for your work on somebody else's project, time for answering an inquiry, time for answering a posting to the SCAPA website that asks a technical question or makes a point that isn't valid. You need to be involved, and you need to feel free to be involved. Another partner, in answer to the same questions, analyzed his response this way. You have three categories of equal weight: entrepreneurship skills, communication skills, and personal attributes. Within those three attributes, there are subheadings. Entrepreneurship skills include public relationships, building and collecting, and activity in the profession. Communication skills include being a good listener, not just being a good talker. You got to be a good listener, and then you have to have the ability to speak and write clearly about technical matters. Finally, and I thought it was interesting that this is last on the list, You have to have the kinds of personal attributes that these folks regard as making you successful and want you to be involved with their client. Ethical, no substitute for that. You have to be proficient in technology. You have to be an efficient researcher, goal-oriented, with respect for the law. Here we have a few thoughts just to summarize the material and to encourage you in the profession. There are my credentials. My name, I was licensed, I took the exam in Oklahoma. My number is 2101, and I was granted the lofty degree of tax specialist in 1965. Good tax people are going to add value. They give tax advice based on their knowledge of the law and their knowledge of the client. Good tax people will assure tax compliance to avoid costly errors. Good tax people will have read about a bogus tax shelter. Good tax people will have read about an IRS audit initiative and provide early warning for some things that you may not want to share with the government. Good tax people will add value by helping you with the tax planning for end of life. It's never a pleasant thing to talk about. It's never a pleasant thing to do. But a good tax person will attract the trust of the client, let's say a small business person, and the client's spouse, and the client's children, so that everyone trusts the good tax person because there have been tax-saving ideas and there has been efficient tax compliance along the way, and now we're willing to trust this person with tax planning for the end of life. You can make good money doing this. I think that's as important as anything else, maybe more important for some of you. You're often going to be the only person in the room who really knows the question. Never mind knowing the answer. Because you know the tax law and because you know the client, you know the question and you know the answer. Skip the outtake on the cough. The value of a tax professional is going to be expressed at least once a year when the client files an income tax return. Think about that. Sometimes the value will be once in a lifetime, as I was just discussing on the preceding slide. At the end of the life, when the cost of dying can be reduced because you know what you know and you gave good advice and the client embraced your advice, and now there is more money for the client's loved ones and less money for the government when the client makes the journey across the river. So, always consider the value of your services. I wanted to get to this. Your time, and your time is not just time. If I spend an hour on a matter for you, I'm applying a half a lifetime of study. My time includes applying my knowledge and my skill, negotiating with tax authorities, the value of any outcome. So when I'm billing the client, I'm going to bill, number one, I'm going to consider time. But every bill is going to have a value element. I really think that's important. And if you're engaged in this training program, don't go back to your firm and tell the partners that you don't care what they say. Nichols said they should value bill. That's not what I said. I said, for me, I value bill. I recommend that you consider it. If your firm is not value billing, I recommend that you be someone who advocates for it and who might even bring it up. Be prepared to defend it as a viable way of charging for what we know, not just how long it takes us to get there or how long how long the taxing authority questions. Just the value, what did we do and what was the outcome? I don't mind value billing at all if my hour results in a $5,000 beneficial outcome. Now, I'm not going to bill outrageously, but if my hour results in a $5,000 beneficial tax outcome, I have no qualms at all about billing $500 for the hour. And I make it clear in my engagement letter that my invoices will include considerations for the time required and the value of the services provided, so that there's no misunderstanding about whether I will or will not value bill. So if you're going to get good at this, you got to learn what's important to your client. The advice from several seasoned and successful tax practitioners we interviewed for these programs is always based on one foundation. Time and time again, invest the time to know your client. If the client's a manufacturer, what do they make? Who do they sell it to? What are the raw materials? Are there any special processes? If it's an owner-managed business, a dry cleaner, a service station, a small processor, where does that business fit in to the jigsaw puzzle of everyday commerce? The client is a small business, a seafood importer. Who do they sell to? Well, they sell to restaurants. Great. Who do they buy from? They buy from seafood wholesalers who bring fish in directly. So we identify the client in the middle. The client has a dry cleaner, right? Who do they sell to? The public. Who do they buy from? Maybe it's a franchise operation and they buy from the franchisor. The franchisee's stuck. They have to buy stuff from the franchisor. And you need to know that before you open your trap and say, you know, you're paying too much for chemicals. They probably already know that, but the franchise fee is wrapped up in the chemicals. And if you'd known anything about their business, you would not have made that comment. See what I mean? If it's an individual, why did they decide to hire a CPA? What benefit am I expected to provide? I've had more than one client over 50 years say, listen, I want you to help me report this so it doesn't attract the attention of the IRS. That's not the business I'm in. I'm in the business of making sure that your return is accurate and truthful. I'm not in the business of helping you hide anything from anybody. And like anything of value, folks, it will not be free. More than one of these successful CPAs cautions that you should not expect to learn what you need to know to be valuable to others as a tax expert without serious personal commitment. I read Tax Notes Today every day. That's a publication by tax analysts. Every morning, I look for news of court decisions that might affect my clients. I look for IRS rulings on tax matters that might affect my clients. General information that might affect every taxpayer that I'm expected to know. I often read and brief a court decision, and by briefing, I mean I outline it. I often read and brief a court decision much like we did when we were students, when we were in school, because the need for learning never stops. If a note written by someone like me who undertakes to summarize what's in the note, if that is long and involved, then my work's going to be long and involved. If it's short, my work will be short. Decide now. Before you waste any more time trying to become a tax professional, decide right now. Are you willing to invest some personal time in your personal development or not? There are other things to do that are easier, but then, you've come this far. Why not go all in and make the commitment? I hope that you will continue your involvement and your growth as a tax professional. Your firm needs you. The profession needs you. And I think you'll find the personal satisfaction that comes from knowing the answers to tax questions before they are asked to be very satisfying as a professional. This morning, I was reading tax notes today, and the IRS has published a 26-page announcement of all of the items that are adjusted for inflation for 2021. Now, this is November of 2020, late in the year, granted, but I'm going to know, by the fact that I picked up this morning's tax news, I'm going to know that the inflation-adjusted amounts are out. So when I am giving tax advice, when I am analyzing a client's situation for 2021 using 2020 information or using 2021 estimates from the client, it's useful and it's gratifying for the client to know that their tax advisor is really up to date because he or she was on top of the inflation adjustments that were just published this morning. See what I mean? It doesn't cost anything to take a few minutes with your morning coffee or your Wheaties or your peanut butter sandwich, whatever works for you, before you go out the door. It doesn't cost anything to make sure that you're technically up to date as a professional will be expected to be.